You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio. If you ask anyone with even an iota of good sense and good taste, they will tell you there is only one program on 2 Point Radio worth listening to. It is this one. Welcome to the Sir Nigel Bickleworth Show. You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio. Welcome back to your favorite radio station with the vastly overqualified Sir Nigel Bickleworth. I'm here to inform, to entertain, and to bring some small measure of sophistication to your drab little lives. Should any of you have any requests for popular tunes, as I believe people like to call them, do not hesitate to repress that impulse. I have no intention of playing any of that drivel.
This is Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
Do not despair, radio aficionados. Your daily dose of worldliness and sophistication has arrived. I am Nigel Bickleworth, and this is 2 Point Radio. I am, as you know, an expert on local history, so from time to time I shall endeavour to educate you all on matters of 2 Points past. For instance, did you know the recently constructed hospital was built on a hamster burial ground? Of course, I for one would not be surprised if this parasite hotel attracted a whole new kind of rodent. Next, another stirring piece of contemporary music.
2 Point Radio.
Ahoy hoy, my comrades in arts. Sir Nigel Bickleworth here, once more, filling your radio with charm and a discerning ear for truly exquisite music. And we begin with this immortal classic. You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio. Your patience is finally rewarded, dear listener. That's right, your long wait for Sir Nigel Bickleworth's return is over. This is 2 Point Radio, and what a treasure trove of music we have lined up for you.
2 Point Radio.
The weather report. I'm expected to read the weather. Well, if I must. Chances of precipitation have increased exponentially due to a higher concentration of moisture at high altitudes. And that's the weather.
This is Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
You have arrived at 2 Point Radio's cultural oasis. I am Sir Nigel Bickleworth, here to nourish your mind and your soul for the next few hours with the finest sounds produced by man or beast.
2 Point Radio.
Wasn't that an abysmal little tune? And if you enjoyed that, you will positively love the execrable ditty coming up next. Dear listeners, if you are forced to visit a branch of Swindles, by all accounts 2 Point County's most popular bank, be prepared for an existential crisis. Be prepared also to lose all your money. That is all I will say on the subject. I feel it my duty to warn you about the dangers of travelling abroad. Not only will you encounter scoundrels who think nothing of pickpocketing your 19th century velvet wallet, but you will have to spend time at Grockle Falls Airport, a more ghastly place I cannot recall. And now for Sir Nigel Reviews, in which Sir Nigel reviews the new fitness centre in Lower Bullocks, the Steel Buns Gym. I spent a very pleasant afternoon in the sauna, but did not care for the smells as one walks down the corridor. In short, I would stick with the perspiration spa in Grockle Bay.
This is Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
You're listening to the illuminating Sir Nigel Bickleworth. As you know, I am the former film critic for the Daily Sneer, a national newspaper of some renown, so you can trust my opinion when I say every single film you love is an artless, trashy cash grab you should be ashamed of watching. Stay tuned for more opinions. For this very special edition of Sir Nigel Reviews, I visited the 7 Feet Under Funerary Home. I wish to make arrangements for my own eventual demise, and as with everything else, one must try before buying. After being buried for 3 hours in a variety of coffins, I finally decided on a lovely worm-resistant oak casket. Greatly recommended. Here is a list of things I like and don't like. Things I don't like. Almost anything you could care to mention. Things I do like. Making lists of things I don't like. More gems on the way after whatever sounds emanate from your radio when I'm not talking. It's time for another Sir Nigel Reviews. Many of you will be acquainted with the Croquembouche bookshop Turn Up the Volumes, but as it has recently come under new management, I decided to peruse their current selection. Far too many modern scribblers for my liking, but their section on pointillist poetry is still second to none. A new antique shop has opened in Brighton, so naturally I visited it for today's Sir Nigel Reviews. I must say that Barlow and Streaker Antiques is a terrible disappointment. The only real antiques appear to be the owners, who surely belong to another century, if not another world entirely. One to avoid. Another tidbit of 2-point history for you. Did you know the medieval monk Matthew Wobertide founded a monastery on what is now a pet shop? Pity the animals don't keep a vow of silence. I simply cannot stand all that squawking. Not dissimilar to the music coming up next. For this edition of Sir Nigel Reviews, I thought I would brave the so-called wonders of the modern world and attend a 3-dimensional screening at the local cinema. Why one would wish for an extra dimension to such drivel, I do not know. I spent much of the film ducking under the seat. I suggest you do the same. Time for a call-in, and today's subject is, oh goody, some upcoming prehistoric sporting event, which will no doubt elicit any number of tribal grunts from our listeners. Fortunately, the supporters of 2-Point FC have yet to decipher how to operate the telephone, so let's just sit in silence for a while, shall we? Today we begin a new segment in which we shall explore the history of 2-Point County and its many landmarks. We open with one of our most famous sites, Grogbin's Ring. Grogbin, as you may know, was a giant said to live in this region in ancient times. As for his use of the stones themselves, we can only speculate. I like to think they were his croquet hoops. As if we needed any further example of the decline of Western civilization, I leave you with this nugget. I used to live in a mansion. Now I live in a maisonette. This is what society has reduced one of its greatest talents to. Truly, these are the end of times. We continue our series on the history of 2-Point County with the oldest farm in the region, Merrydung. Not named, as many people suppose, after the droppings of its livestock, the farm was founded by one Edmund Merrydung. He was so suited to his profession, he was said to have dung running through his veins. I sincerely hope that was just a colourful piece of imagery. In this edition of the History of 2-Point County, we are looking at One-Eyed Wallace, the delightful old lighthouse in Hogsport. It is named, as many of you will know, after Wallace Tugbottom, the region's first lighthouse keeper. What you may not know is that he lost his left eye in a high-stakes game of snap. No account of the history of our county could be complete without including the Underlook Hotel, sitting in the shadow of the Pointy Mountains and famed for its salacious past and present ghost sightings. It is hardly any wonder, given that the building was constructed over an ancient Morris dancer's burial ground. You have been warned. The ubiquitous Jasmine Odyssey, a popular warbler among our uneducated youth, was seen visiting a hospital earlier today. Perhaps she underwent a vocal cord transplant and will now sing with something resembling skill. We can only hope. I have received a note saying that the famed actor Roderick Cushion was visiting a local hospital earlier today. Something that might cause me a modicum of excitement if only I knew who he was. And just what the devil is a perilous spandex anyway? Moving on. I'm hearing that Augustus Lavender, the CEO of Holistics, visited a rival hospital today. No doubt offered to spread some ungodly incense around the place, as if natural remedies had any place in a hospital. My contract stipulates I must read the following ad copy. Buy Potsworth frozen peas. Potsworth frozen peas grow in July, and by the following month, which is August, they are canned and ready to... Oh, I can't read this swill. Who wrote it? And how can you grow frozen peas? And who freezes cans? Is it really necessary to tell everyone which month follows July? And this sentence construction, good grief, you treat them like farmyard animals. The whole thing is a disgrace to humanity. Honest, I can't do this anymore. You waste my time, you people. I've had enough. I'm going for a Chardonnay. Sophie Nova, CEO of Bungle Technologies, went on a tour of the county's many hospitals. If I know anything about Miss Bungle, she was probably there to mock their primitive, outdated equipment.
This is Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
Fear not, faithful listeners, your favorite radio personality, Sir Nigel Bickleworth, is back. As much as I would like to quit this infernal booth forever, I just cannot deprive you of my wit. I take the responsibility of being your only source of intellectual stimulation very seriously indeed. More instantly forgettable melodies coming up next. It seems Agatha Sphere, the oddball who oversees the Orb Foundation, spent some time visiting hospitals today. I wouldn't be surprised if the shameless charlatan was recruiting the sick and infirm for her peculiar organization. Our esteemed government Minister for Health, Tarquin Foxbridge, has been doing the rounds at a few hospitals today. One can only hope his red tape can hold together these so-called public services. I have a letter here from Gabby Digger, who says, I have looked into your background, Mr. Bickleworth, and have discovered you are not a sir at all. Please stop referring to yourself as such. Well, Miss Digger, had you but excavated a little further, you would have seen that sir is actually my first given name. Nigel is merely my middle name. So when I say I am Sir Nigel Bickleworth, I am being 100% accurate. Now try digging yourself out of that hole, Gabby. Ha! Mayor Winsock has spent much of the day touring some of our local hospitals. One wonders if she marveled at the advances in modern medicine or recoiled, as I do, at the conditions in some of our busiest facilities. Sally Figblanket, 2 Point Radio's roving reporter, has been investigating the state of our local hospitals today. I certainly hope she did not waste any time interviewing patients. I mean, what possible value would that have? It's time for the traffic report, in which I wish to point out the extreme rudeness of today's drivers. Really, it is high time there was an etiquette test before one was able to gain a license. And to the rotund gentleman who raised his finger at me this morning, you know which finger I'm talking about. I will just say this. You, sir, are a bore and a clod. Next traffic report in an hour. I say, I felt the effects of that earthquake all the way over here. The framed honorary doctorate I was awarded for my many accomplishments very nearly fell on my head. I shall have to do some tidying up, so why don't you listen to some music while I do just that? We've received some reports of an earthquake which has caused particular damage to one of the county's hospitals. This is why one must never be without insurance, and I heartily recommend Swindle's Insurance, who in no way paid me to endorse them. 2 Point Radio. I overheard 2 adolescents mocking a poster advertising this very radio station and yours truly. And can you believe it? They didn't even know what radio was. I'll tell you what radio is, you sultana-brained miscreants. It is a delivery system for class and integrity. It is the home of the world's noblest profession. And it is the fastest-growing medium among people with 3-figure IQs. Next up, some god-awful jingles. Some disturbing news regarding an outbreak of disease in 2 Point County. Let us hope the brave men and women in our local hospital can deal with the matter swiftly. If not, let us hope a helicopter can airlift me to a safe location. I blame the poor sanitary conditions in this county, but once again, we are hearing reports of an epidemic causing a strain on our always overworked hospitals. Please, people, shower daily and leave your rubbish in a proper receptacle. I hope you enjoyed that piece of sonic horse manure passing itself off as music. Maybe one day the station manager will listen to me and we can play some proper music. Bartok, Shostakovich, real composers. One sees advertisements for Holistics, this supposedly environmentally conscious company, everywhere these days, mostly in the form of cheap and nasty pamphlets. Well, I, for one, won't be falling for their bargain basement tricks. I'm only influenced by expensive campaigns. Thank you very much. I wonder what madness Bungle Tech will dream up next. I read in the 2 Point Squabbler they've managed to attach a human ear to a kettle. Another victory for the modern world, I'm sure.
This is Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
One must put up with so many offensive inventions these days, pure travesties that belittle all of humanity. But I ask you, pork pies? What will they think of next? A bit of a fiasco down at the Bungle Technologies lab this morning, I hear. It seems they were trying to collide 2 artificially created black holes, but the whole experiment went nowhere. You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio. Yet another reason to avoid Crockle Falls Airport. You always find a group of those tiresome Orb Foundation acolytes handing out leaflets and chanting their damn mantras. The authorities really ought to do something about them. I stumbled into one of those Orb Foundation centers by mistake the other day. They tried to give me an IQ test, as if they could possibly measure the vast intellect of Sir Nigel Bickleworth. Take care, dear listeners, lest it happen to you.
This is Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
I'm sure you will agree that was an extraordinary piece of music. A wonderful example of non-diatonic counterpoint. Stay tuned for more groundbreaking compositions. Honestly, the state of this radio station is deplorable at times. I have half a mind to speak to the janitor about it. In fact, I should call upon Mr. Henry Jobsworth, the county's health and safety inspector, and close personal friend of mine, to make his own assessment. I'll let you know how I get on. I have just spoken to Mr. Henry Jobsworth, the county's health and safety inspector, to report 2 Point Radio's lack of hygiene, but I was told he's too busy visiting hospitals. I suggest the inspector re-examines his priorities. In the meantime, here's another dreadful tune. 2 Point Radio. Our reporter on the field, Sally Fig Blanket, has just returned with her camera crew from another field trip. As to what she was reporting on, I cannot say. Nobody tells me anything. A word to the editors of our esteemed local newspaper in regard to the recent headline which read, "Local radio DJ is a total pendant." In the parlance of today's youth, I do not think that means what you think it means. The word you were looking for was pedant. We ought to give thanks each day that our humble little county has attracted such giants of industry as Jumbo and some of these new upstarts. It is to these brave companies I dedicate the following song. I see Jumbo McNally, CEO of the all-powerful Jumbo Corp, has donated some of his free time to visit rival hospitals. How generous of this business titan to offer his advice to our ailing institutions. Time for Question of the Day, in which I invite you to ask me anything you want, no matter how difficult the subject. Our caller is Patrick. What is your question, Patrick?
Can you explain what a quantum harmonic oscillator is?
Yes, I can. And we'll be back with another Question of the Day tomorrow. You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio. People really ought to stop complaining about Jumbo Corp simply because they happen to be the best and most successful company around. I myself am no stranger to this very kind of envy, which can cause other, less talented DJs to lash out. My response? Let's play some more music. I thought I spotted Jumbo McNally, the genius businessman who heads Jumbo Corp, walking into our studio this morning. Alas, it was merely a cardboard cutout advertising his upcoming lecture on the financial future of 2 Point County. I've signed up to hear his inspiring words, and so should you. Today, I would like to introduce a new segment which I call 2 Points of View. In it, I will give you 2 rather different points of view on a contentious subject. So, for example, view A could be, this is a rather fine idea for a segment, whereas view B would then be, this segment is an embarrassing waste of time. Stay tuned for more of these controversial debates next week. Once again, 1 or 2 scaremongers in the press are criticizing Jumbo Corp for buying up a few small companies, reducing their staff's wages and creating a massive monopoly. When will these people learn that this is what capitalism is all about? If you don't like it, go to one of those communist counties. See what you think of that. 2 Point Radio. Put aside your humdrum worries. It's time to stimulate the intellect and inspire the soul. That's right, this is Sir Nigel Bickleworth, here on 2 Point Radio. You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio. I am Sir Nigel Bickleworth. This is 2 Point Radio, and you are a very fortunate audience. But no need to thank me, I'm just doing my job. Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio. I am Sir Nigel Bickleworth. This is 2 Point Radio, and you are a very fortunate audience. But no need to thank me, I'm just doing my job. I suppose it's that time of year when Grockle Bay is inundated with hormonally charged vandals, known to the world as students. Excuse me while I take a bottle of sherry and retreat to my bomb shelter. 2 Point Radio. It's time to apply the nourishing balm that is my voice on all your cultural wounds. Yes, Sir Nigel Bickleworth here, welcoming you to another great show on 2 Point Radio. 2 Point Radio. Fear not, dear listeners, for Sir Nigel Bickleworth has arrived to elevate your radio experience beyond the mundane. But first, a piece of music. Holistics is apparently going to open another of its nature communes for sick people with more sense than money. Fortunately, I have equal amounts of sense and money. I visited a sick friend who has taken the foolish decision to check himself into one of Holistic's nature communes. Call me old-fashioned, but patients are supposed to be treated by doctors in hospitals, not have leaves rubbed on them by druids. You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio. If you ask me, Bungle has overstepped its bounds with its latest treatment for wonky ankle syndrome. The procedure involves transplanting the foot of an athlete to the patient. Goodness knows what their treatment for athlete's foot might be. You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio. Forget all the nonsense you've heard so far. I am Nigel Bickleworth, and I'm here to restore civility to 2 Point Radio. You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio. Bungle Meditech has announced a major breakthrough in the cure for baldness, though they have refused to share any details. One wonders if this has anything to do with the explosion in Blyton, which saw a forest of hair spring up overnight.
This is Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
Welcome, my friends, my chums, to 2 Point Radio's haven of culture in an otherwise blighted landscape. I am your host, Sir Nigel Bickleworth, here to amuse and delight you. You won't catch me attending one of the Orb's wellness centres, I can assure you of that. I hear they make patients wear strange robes, for one thing. No, it's a good old-fashioned hospital gown for me, or nothing. Backless, of course. 2 Point Radio. This is 2 Point Radio, and I am Nigel Bickleworth at your service. And so we begin another of our shows with a little something I like to call music. You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio. The Orb Foundation's healthcare division is nothing but a load of hocus-pocus hogwash, if you ask me. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to see the only thing they're good at is brainwashing. I had a little mishap in the kitchen last night while slicing white truffles, making rather a dreadful gash in my index finger. But after a quick trip to a jumbo hospital to have a gold-laced plaster applied, all was well again. Money well spent, I say. You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio. Hello, my dear confidants. Sir Nigel Bickleworth, hero of the cultural elites, has arrived to grace your radio with his infinite insight and good taste. Did you know that the doctors who work for Jumbo Medical Solutions are the richest in the world? You can keep all your fancy degrees. When it comes to inspiring confidence, money does it every time. If you are ever fortunate enough to visit the Jumbo head offices, I urge you to have a meal at its 17-star restaurant. Usually, only Jumbo executives are allowed to eat there, but they do make the odd exception for a humble radio broadcaster now and again.
This is Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
And once again, I, Sir Nigel Bickleworth, bid you a very cordial welcome to my humble show. For the next few hours, I shall endeavour to enlighten your grey little lives. You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio. Shares of Jumbo are at an all-time high today after its chief executive announced record earnings for the past year, which is good news for me because I have 3 shares myself. Here is a little celebratory song. Jumbo are about to launch their most expensive product yet on a breathless market. They haven't yet announced what the product is or in what way it might be useful, but already the pre-orders are through the roof. That's the genius of Jumbo, ladies and gentlemen. A cheeky little number for today's sommelier over the rainbow, the Marilyn Merlot, a full-bodied, plummy, almost sticky wine that seduces the palate with a kaleidoscope of sensual fruits and a lingering taste of caramel. Now excuse me while I drink another bottle. Time for another sommelier over the rainbow, today featuring a bottle of 2009 Pale Toad. This charmless Chardonnay is as insipid a wine as I've ever spat out. It has a foul nose, hinting at leftover baked beans. As for the taste, well, I would rather lick an actual toad than drink another glass. And now for today's sommelier over the rainbow, featuring the robust Spigot Noir. With a bouquet of blackberries and slightly used gym towels, this wine will simply knock your socks off. In fact, if I drink another glass, I may have to rename this segment Sommelier Under the Table.
2 Point Radio.
You are listening to the voice of Nigel Bickleworth, your host and cultural guide on 2 Point Radio. And what a splendid show I have for you today. Don't go anywhere. The wine under review in this edition of Sommelier Over the Rainbow is the evocatively named Quai Shiraz. An elegant little number to be sure, combining the flavour of toasted crumpets, slightly undercooked lobster, and the dew hanging from a flower in a remote mountain region. Recommended if you want to get sloshed in style. In today's Sommelier Over the Rainbow, I look at the most popular, most vulgar sparkling wine in 2 Point County's supermarkets, the Porco Prosecco. Dress it up any way you want, Signor Porco. The fact remains that this is very much an amateur secco, not a pro one. You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio. And now, the dulcet tones of yours truly, Sir Nigel Bickleworth. We have fascinating discussions and some top-notch melodies coming your way right here on 2 Point Radio. This is Sir Nigel Reviews. Today, I wish to talk about Let There Be Lamps, the new lamp shop on Stumpy Lane. With over 20,000 varieties of lamps, you won't find a wider selection anywhere. Unfortunately, the light they emit will no doubt lay bare just how drab your little homes are, so perhaps a candle will suffice for most listeners. And now for a slightly different edition of Sir Nigel Reviews. Today I would like to review Blossington Park in Hogsport, where I recently made the mistake of eating my packed lunch. The benches are medieval torture devices, the grass is a nauseous shade of green, and there are children everywhere. Avoid like the literal plague.
This is Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
Nigel Bickleworth here, once more bestowing your radio apparatus with erudition and refinement. Stay tuned for more of my unsolicited opinions. Last night I attended a local Amdram production, which I shall now review in the same vein as it was performed. Badly. The chosen play stank. The actors had the emotional range of cucumbers. Oh, and the costumes were a joke. I think that about covers it.
2 Point Radio.
For this edition of Sir Nigel Reviews, I visited the Merrydung Market, paying particular attention to its artisanal cheese stall. That is to say, the stall itself was made of cheese. It being a warm, sunny day, you can imagine the aroma, not to mention the mess. Luckily, the stall next to it was made of crackers, so all ended well.
2 Point Radio.
I'm back, dear listeners, and today the Sir Nigel Bickleworth Show is brought to you by Pretense, the scent all this year's sophisticates are wearing.
This is Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
In today's Sir Nigel Reviews, I would like to break precedent and recommend an electronic store, which one can access on what I believe is called the Information Highway. I'm talking, of course, of Elbow Patches Direct. With the mere press of a computer pointing device, you will have access to hundreds of wonderful leather and suede patches. Your jackets will thank you for it. I'm delighted to say I will be giving a lecture at our local university on the topic of pretentiousness, namely, how to do it correctly. Perhaps my contribution will put a halt to the alarming decline in educational standards in our community. You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio. I have received the latest lyrical opus by obscure local poet Tobias Dirge, who had the audacity to submit it for my Sir Nigel Review segment. Well, Mr. Dirge, I would urge that you purge our county of this execrable volume. Rhyming is not a right, it's a privilege. I shall be visiting the Old Crock Museum in Sweaty Palms later this week. I sincerely hope they have corrected the multiple cases of mislabeled geodes I spotted last time. Speaking of museums, I believe this next song belongs in one. Anyone who has engaged in any sort of social interaction of late will be aware that there is a severe lack of good manners in our fair county. Since our education system seems incapable of fixing this problem, I entreat you to listen to my Sir Nigel's Guide to Good Manners series. Perhaps I alone can stem the tide of incivility. The lack of an opera house in this county is making us culturally irrelevant. We will never be taken seriously until we remedy the situation. So join me tomorrow as we march into Croquembouche and demand the mayor build one. In the meantime, here's an overture to get us in the mood. In this edition of my Guide to Good Manners, I tackle the tricky subject of hat wearing. When to wear one, when to remove one, and when to doff one. The answer to all these is, of course, never. None of you would look as remotely debonair in a hat as I do, so stay away from them. A rather delicate point in this edition of my Guide to Good Manners, that is, how to properly use public loo facilities. First of all, make no noise. Make no contact with any surface. Make no contact with any eyes. And for crying out loud, please at least pretend to wash your hands. I see Jasmine Odyssey is in the news again. We live in an age of vapid celebrities, where real music is pushed aside like a vagabond asking for change. Real music like the following masterpiece. If you should find yourself dining out at a reputable dining establishment, it behoves you to follow today's guide for good manners. Always order the most expensive items on the menu, particularly if you're ordering for a lady friend. Oh, and dress appropriately. One does not wish to eat while seeing a luridly attired oaf pawing at his cutlery.
2 Point Radio.
Is there any more stirring sight than watching One-Eyed Wallace, our venerable old lighthouse, casting its wondering and luminescent gaze upon the sea? So it is to Wallace I dedicate this delightful little piece of music. In today's Guide to Good Manners, I would like to turn my attention to the selection and drinking of wine. If you are the type that is content to swill the house red, whatever that may be, you have no place in a fine establishment. More than anything, however, you must remember that one never spits out wine in a restaurant. You would be surprised how many do. In today's Guide to Good Manners, we shall discuss the making of telephone calls, particularly ones made to radio stations. Firstly, do not shout. Speak in a calm, clear voice, preferably in a voice you would deem too posh for everyday conversation. State your name and be polite at all times. Also, do not call me names and then quickly hang up. That is the height of rudeness. Someone left snacks in our kitchen, and, feeling a mite peckish, I made the mistake of inserting one into my mouth. I cannot begin to describe the vile, unnatural taste. Apparently these monstrosities go by the moniker of cheesy gubbins. Avoid them at all costs. Hopefully this next tune will cleanse my palate. I will now discuss an important aspect of being a well-mannered individual, one that even the least of us does every single day. I'm talking of walking down the street. Do not jostle, do not spit, do not walk too slow or too fast, and most of all, do not get in my way. I hope I've made myself clear. I have been informed that Cheesy Gubbins are a proud sponsor of 2 Point Radio, and are in fact delicious morsels of tempting cheddary delectation. I will choke down my pride and admit I was wrong. Now let us savour some music and never speak of this again. Let us take a look at the proper behaviour to exhibit when dealing with loud and unruly neighbours. The first step is to knock politely on their door, smile, and ask them to decrease their boisterousness. The second step is to call in the riot police and insist that they gas the hooligans at once. Is there any more hideous space in all this county than the meltdowns? Nothing but a toxic wasteland. Why, when I was a lad, it was merely a wasteland. That's progress for you. Let it not be said that Nigel Bickleworth is an obsolete stick in the mud. Today we tackle the manners of that most futuristic of communication methods, the electronic mail. The etiquette here is to write as one would a 19th century epistle. This means one may wait 2 or 3 weeks to reply in order to counterbalance the frightful immediacy of computerized letters. If you are not in the habit of attending classical concerts, you may want to listen to today's guide to good manners. Do not applaud until those who know better than you are applauding. Do not sit in front of me if you have a large head. And if you must cough, it had better be a death rattle or we shall have words. Incidentally, this also applies to plays. Today's guide to good manners is one that is dear to my heart. How to greet one's betters. Well, I, for one, would prefer you to bow, even kneel if you're up to it. Make no eye contact unless encouraged to do so. Also, do not forget that my first name is Sir. If all that is too much to remember, just don't greet me at all. That's the kind of music that is apt to make spluttering Nora wake up in a violent fury. Perhaps this next tune can calm down our mercurial volcano. I know it soothes my nerves whenever I hear it. If ever you have found yourself at a loss as to the correct usage of the English language, you may enjoy my popular guide to good grammar, a public service I perform with no shortage of humility. I would do one to proper enunciation as well, but I fear your underdeveloped vocal abilities would make this quite impossible.
This is Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
The sport of kings may be polo, but the sport of gentlemen is played at the sloop. You won't see me there, of course. Far too much rough and tumble even in the stands, but it's nice to know it's there. Today I will tackle what is to many of you an unsurmountable grammatical stumbling block. The difference between who and whom. It's really rather simple. The latter ends with an M, the former does not. I suppose it's that time of year when Grockle Bay is inundated with hormonally charged vandals, known to the world as students. Excuse me while I take a bottle of sherry and retreat to my bomb shelter. One crucial thing to really understand when it comes to grammar: do not listen to those who say that language is a flexible, evolving thing. It has rules, and they must be obeyed, else we exist in linguistic chaos, and civilization will surely crumble. And yes, that split infinitive at the start was a little joke. Ha ha. You may have noticed the composer of the piece of music I played earlier was Cornelius Stuckenglock. He led an interesting life, did old Cornelius, briefly married to a jacket potato. But then genius does lead to the odd eccentricity or two. You have doubtlessly had many anxious moments wondering whether you have placed your apostrophes correctly. Here is a simple grammar guide to help you through such torment. Try communicating through drawings. They may be more adequate to your intellectual level. If you were ever to tell me that you could care less, I will take you at your word and believe that you currently care more about the subject at hand than someone who does not care at all. Please keep this grammatical faux pas in mind, and we shall avoid any unfortunate misunderstandings. It has perhaps escaped the attention of most, but 2 Point County features a true marvel of modern engineering, the Pointy Mountain Bridge. If you enjoy crossing things, you simply must experience it for yourself. Do you sometimes wonder whether to say you and I or you and me? Congratulations, you are one of the many poorly educated louts who make life unbearable. There is a very simple formula you can apply to discover which form is the correct one, but I fear even that would be too complex for you poor souls. You may have heard at some point over the course of your lives that it is improper to end a sentence with a preposition. Bosh and piffle, I hear you say. Yet it is undoubtedly true. Unless you wish to sound like a barbarian, you will never again utter a phrase such as, "This isn't advice I'm going to listen to." We now bring you this segment, Sir Nigel Reviews. Today I take a look at the new fine dining establishment Le Soufflé Triste, and what a delight for the experienced palate this is. The scrambled emu eggs on pickled toast are particularly good. I give it 4 salt shakers. If any of you wish to see my head explode, and I'm sure many among you do, all you need to do is send in a postcard in which you misspell effect for affect, or vice versa. Truly, there is no greater blight than this despicable and all too common error. At the urging of a fellow grammophile, I spent some time last night on something called a forum, which one can access via computer, also I'm told, via an ambulatory telephone. I shall not soon forget the crimes against the English language I witnessed there. I can only conclude that my guide to good grammar is a futile effort. That is all I will say for now. In today's Sir Nigel Reviews, I cast a critical eye on Grockle Bay's most exclusive nightclub, the Coba Banana. At least, I thought it was exclusive. I entered expecting class, elegance, and a lounge jazz band. Instead, I got youthful, sweaty revelers convulsing to some ungodly noise. I shall not be making a repeat visit. Let it never be said that I, Sir Nigel, am merely some city-bound dilettante incapable of roughing it in the wilderness. Why, only the other day my chauffeur took a wrong turn, and we ended up on the edges of Tumblewood. I escaped unharmed from this bracing encounter, and rather enjoyed the colour of the trees. So there. And now, Sir Nigel Reviews. This time, looking at the new bakery in Croquembouche, Do Re Mi. It has a breathtaking selection of musically inspired pastries, such as the strumming strudel and the cacophonous cake. I award it 4 macarons. Ha! And now for a segment I call Sommelier Over the Rainbow, in which I will be discussing my favourite vintages, vineyards, and corkscrews. Today we turn our attention to the 86 Chateau Clunk. I would describe its flavour as nice. Stay tuned for more wine talk next time. And so another day begins in 2 Point County, where students at the Mitten School of Medicine may soon be able to practice on actual living people. Any budding doctors should remember that gluing heads back on to accidentally decapitated patients is all very well with dummies, but there are no do-overs in real life. This week I headed to the Pointy Mountains for my Sir Nigel Reviews segment. If you have any plans of staying at the Underlook Hotel, I must warn you, be prepared to hear typewriter noises throughout the night. As if that weren't bad enough, there's blood coming off elevators and ghosts everywhere. Hardly a restful stay, I'm sure you'll agree. There is really very little reason to visit 2 Point County's desert region, and even less reason to set foot upon its drabbest little town. I speak, of course, of Smogley, where popular pastimes include vigorous coughing and waiting in line for surgery. Well, I suppose everyone has to live somewhere. Anyone who has spent time on a hot, sticky, uncomfortable beach knows what to expect of a place like Sweaty Palms. But this seaside resort has the added frisson of being in the shadow of spluttering Nora, a dormant but nonetheless menacing volcano, and suffering from frequent earthquakes. In short, I suggest you construct your puny little sandcastles elsewhere. In this edition of Sir Nigel Reviews, I will be talking about the tea shop in Hogsport, scone but not forgotten. And, as its name implies, it is indeed a memorable dining experience, with over 700 varieties of teas and 400 types of scones. You will never run out of things to scoff right down. How could one fail to be impressed by the high-rise modern surroundings of Pelican Wharf? Here, businesses live on the cutting edge, driven by the latest technologies, thriving under enormous pressures. Little wonder its residents demand nothing less from their healthcare services. Now excuse me while I have a lie down. 2 Point Radio. It is time to leave the woes of your petty, pointless little lives behind and listen to the fountainhead of wisdom that is I, Sir Nigel Bickleworth, here on 2 Point Radio. If you're thinking of checking yourself into a holistics commune or purchasing one of their many risible products, I can save you the considerable expense, not to mention social embarrassment, by offering an alternative. Simply rub some basil on your derriere and howl at the moon. The results will be the same. And now, my ever-popular guide to good manners, in which I turn my attention to wedding etiquette. The first step should always be to decline the invitation. Should that prove impossible, perhaps you are the best man, or, heaven forfend, the groom, then pay attention to every detail of the ceremony and banquet, so you may later criticize them in a loud, obnoxious voice. You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio. We continue our efforts to improve our listeners' minds with another lesson in the correct usage of English grammar. If you ever write defiantly when you mean definitely, I shall hunt you down and beat you about the head with an umbrella. How's that for defiant? Today I shall be reviewing the new driverless limousine service, Ruda. Exquisite luxury, no annoying chit-chat, and a driving program designed to inconvenience all other motorists. Other than the journey ending by veering off a cliff, I can thoroughly recommend it. If I sound particularly unctuous today, it is perhaps due to my new imported cashmere seat warmer. Never has my posterior been so impeccably toasty. I pity all you impoverished listeners whose hindquarters shall never know such opulence. Thanks to my leading role on Sommelier Over the Rainbow, I was invited this past weekend to an exclusive wine tasting at a magnificent mountain chateau. I shall not disclose the name of my host, nor of the other celebrated guests. Suffice to say, it was a pleasure to drink the 400-year-old vintages in their company, and to share an ambulance to the emergency room immediately afterwards.
This is Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
The bell of joy doth ring, for Sir Nigel Bickleworth cometh here on 2 Pointeth Radio. I wanted to do my whole show like this, but the producers have denied you the pleasure. Address your letters of complaints to them forthwith. If you are the kind of simpleton who engages in the vile practice of tea dunking, Bungle's new range of biscuits is just the thing for you. Bungle promises not even the hottest tea will soften their titanium-reinforced coating. Oh, goody! We shall now continue my guide to good manners by exploring a subject of some delicacy. Taking care of elderly relatives. If they're anything like my dear mamma, no expense must be spared in flowers, birthday cards, or bribes for all the nurses who will threaten to quit. Never change, mamma, never change. Point Radio. The English language is an ever-changing thing, unfortunately, which is why it falls to me to guide you through its grammatical minefield. Here's one explosive piece of information for all you youths out there. Tobacco, coffee, and electronic entertainments. None of these things are addicting. They are, however, addictive. Learn the difference. For today's Sir Nigel Reviews, I have been testing out Jumbo's new range of smart monocles. Not only do these ocular aids look stylish and, as their name implies, supremely smart, they can also display stock market and opera updates straight into one's retina. The company has already announced a smart pince nez, which I'm eager to try out. I would like to bring your attention to a new set of delightful commemorative plates featuring a host of 2-point celebrities. Before you ask, yes, my very own face is among them, so whether you hang me over your fireplace or cover me with sticky pudding, you cannot miss the opportunity to purchase this limited edition. I'm told there are only 70,000 left. In this edition of Sommelier Over the Rainbow, I shall be discussing the elusive art of matching the right wine to the right meal. One need not have a double-digit IQ to know fish must be served with a white wine, for example. But which one? I recommend a bottle of albino codswallop, which is particularly good with pickled sturgeon. You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio. Your patience, dear listener, has been rewarded. You have stood by your radio transmitter all morning, desperately hoping for a voice of reason to emerge from its electronic depths. Well, here I am, Sir Nigel Bickleworth, at your service on 2 Point Radio. Once again, I must congratulate Jumbo for being such a pleasure to interact with. After my Jumbo espresso machine broke down for the 5th time this month, they have now replaced it with a new one. Well worth spending half one's salary on extended warranties, I'm sure you'll agree. And now for the continuation of my guide to good manners, where today I will be tackling a situation that comes up all too often, talking to royalty. You must mumble incomprehensibly, avert your eyes at all costs, and lower your head until it touches your shoes. This advice also applies to a lesser extent to barons, duchesses, and other members of the peerage.
This is Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
A hot-button topic in today's grammar lesson: when to use less and when to use fewer. Allow me to demonstrate with an example. You do not have fewer money than me, fewer education than me, or fewer personal hygiene than me, but you do have less of each of those. I hope that clears up the matter. Today I will be reviewing 2 Point's premier walking stick shop, Lean On Me, which can be found tucked away in Pelican Wharf. After test walking a variety of sticks with all manner of beautiful handles, I can genuinely say I did not fall down once. And what greater recommendation could you possibly want? Well, we all knew this time would come. This pitiful, minuscule radio station could not contain a talent of my magnitude for long. I have just received word that I am soon to host a show on a major national station. I will finally have an audience worthy of me, not the plebeian collection of knuckle-dragging pond scum I have now. Farewell, you witless vulgarians. It appears I have once again fallen prey to that most asinine of personal attacks, the prank call. There is no new job, no national radio station, no changing of the winds for Sir Nigel. My earlier tirade was spoken in the heat of passion, and I hope you can forgive this minor slip, if indeed you are intelligent enough to have understood it in the first place. Time for Sir Nigel Reviews. This week I stayed at the Sure Thing Hotel in Sweaty Palms. I went incognito, of course, which perhaps explains the appalling service I experienced. It also explains why none of the guests ever stayed more than an hour. I award it 1 star for the novelty of its rubber bed sheets. In today's edition of Sommelier Over the Rainbow, I shall be examining one of the world's most famous vintages. It's wine, a red one, in a bottle. It has a full body and a nose, and sits on the palate like, oh, who cares, you people wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a Merlot and a carton of fig juice. I'm off to get comprehensively sloshed. Today's Sir Nigel Reviews features my trip to the new exotic restaurant Venusian Spice. Well, if this is what passes for haute cuisine beyond our green shores, I shan't be travelling any time soon. I mean, chilies? Garlic? Not for me, thank you. I've always said electricity was a bad thing. To all those who scoffed at me, spare a thought for the poor souls in a hospital currently under siege from an electrical storm. I have just received news that spluttering Nora, our local and vulgarly named volcano, has erupted once more, causing particular damage to a nearby hospital. Perhaps if it had been given a more elegant name, we wouldn't be having all these problems. For this edition of Sir Nigel Reviews, I visited the famed tailor Dapper John's. Everyone has heard of designer John Phillips, who studied at the Hans School of Tailoring. Oh, and what exquisite suits they are. Trust me, if you want to look like a gentleman, you must wear Dapper John's. There are reports of an avalanche affecting a hospital in the Pointy Mountains. I've never seen the point of snow myself, and this does nothing to convince me of its worth. There is hail falling in the mountain regions, so I advise anyone foolish enough to be up there to use one of Jumbo's ultra-resistant gold-plated umbrellas. Let us hope the hospitals in the area are similarly equipped to deal with the problem. I don't usually review supermarkets, but since I was forced to go into the Crumley Mega Market down in Duckworth-upon-Bilge the other day, I simply had no choice. I have never seen such inferior products. If you want to find quality food, you're better off fishing from a cesspool. Avoid. That mountain-dwelling oddity, Bartholomew F. Yeti, was seen visiting a hospital today. No doubt seeking a cure for that Bigfoot syndrome his foundation represents. Now, I'm not one to spend much time at high altitudes, but I do have a place in my heart for Roquefort. Its ancient castles represent a bygone age when aristocracy literally sat atop the world, looking down on all the peasants below. 2 Point Radio. Greetings and congratulations for joining me on this, the finest day of the year, the day of my birth. Needless to say, today's show will honor the man of the hour, the heartbeat of this county, and the crown jewel of 2 Point Radio. Me, Sir Nigel Bickleworth. I have only one word to say to you today. Trousers, people. Trousers. They ought to be worn at all times. They protect against sunburn and knobbly knee syndrome. Take heed, dear listeners. I cannot help but think back to those birthdays of yesteryear and the sepia days of my youth, breaking in a freshly opened hoop and stick, my sister swallowing her favourite marble, roughhousing in the parlour, the air thick with the smell of Mamma's spotted dick. Ah, those are some of my favourites. Do get in touch to let us know which of my memories is your favourite. A bit of a sticky wicket this morning. Some damn fool put his jam sarnie on it. As you can imagine, the game's been called off. And that's the end of my sport roundup. In today's Sir Nigel Reviews, I will be reviewing birthday candles from Wickwok, Flemington's premier vendor of candles and East Asian culinary equipment. Light? True. Burn? Persistent. Aroma? Not unfragrant. All in all, an admirable effort. The 2-Point Symphony Orchestra did a passable rendition of Sibelius's Second Harmonica Concerto, but the oboe player was simply atrocious. Deserves to be turned into an amuse-bouche, if you ask me. Much like musicians in this next piece. You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2-Point Radio. I have a message from Jerry, who says, "Hello, Nigel. Happy birthday. My name is Jerry. I am 5 years old. How many years old are you?" How dreadfully adorable. Hello, Jerry. Thank you for your well wishes. Unfortunately, I don't answer such uncouth questions. Having read some of your messages, you should be relieved to hear that today's etiquette lesson concerns birthdays. Do not ask someone's age. Jerry, we're looking at you. Do not buy unseemly novelty gifts. Do purchase fine wine and leave it silently on the doorstep. Now, off you go. And now I'd like to introduce a new segment on wine, which I call Sommelier Over the Rainbow. I will be discussing my favorite vintages, vineyards, and corkscrews, beginning today with the 86 Chateau Clunk. I would describe its flavor as nice. Stay tuned for more wine talk next time. On today's Sommelier Over the Rainbow, I will be discussing the vintage I will be treating myself to tonight, because it's my birthday, the 2005 Montepulciano. This exquisite wine may be full of boisterous lead notes, but it's far more bite than bark. It's certain to mark any deserving occasion with grandeur. It's time for Sommelier Over the Rainbow. This week, I will be talking about one of my very favorite wines, the Crushed Cricket Cabernet Sauvignon. Delicate flavors of caraway, silver polish, and just a hint of cricket. I, for one, drink a bottle every morning, and so should you. And steam, and is likely to go over all of your slack-jawed heads. What a delight today's show has been. I can only hope that it pales in comparison to the real deal this time next month. Here's hoping that you enjoyed today's trial run. Ta-ta! Since it is likely you did not fully appreciate the last piece of music I played for you, I just want to say how disappointed I am in all of you. For shame! You hardly deserve to listen to a quality show like mine. Let's hope you can better appreciate this next little ditty.
This is Nigel Bickleworth on 2-Point Radio.
Hello? Yes, it's me, Sir Nigel Bickleworth, and after failing to book off holiday on the station's new and infernal online system, I'm bringing you 2-Point Radio from the shores of Pebbly Reef. My segments will be brief, but they will be. People say to me, "Sir Nigel, how do you find the fortitude to continue such excellent work day after day?" And I reply, because I have been bestowed the gift of broadcasting by some divine force, you simple peasant. One does what one is born to do, and I was born to play this next tune. In light of my little faux pas, send in any amusing mishaps that you've had at work, or at home, or really anything. Just send it all into the station. I won't be there to read it. 2-Point County wasn't always barren of intellect and academic achievement, you know. The little-known philosopher Bernard Tweedwell was born in a Rotting Hill hospital. His greatest contribution was the notion that eyelashes have feelings too. Make of that what you will. And now the weather. The weather here is splendid. There was a little cloud cover earlier, but things have cleared up nicely. Dear listeners, if you are forced to visit a branch of Swindles, by all accounts 2-Point County's most popular bank, be prepared for an existential crisis. Be prepared also to lose all your money. That is all I will say on the subject. 2-Point Radio. In today's news, I had 3 drinks at lunch and am still delivering excellent radio, remotely from an offshore location. Astounding.
In this entry of Sir Nigel Reviews, I'll be reviewing my dinner. But first, I must eat it. I'll be right back.
I have a tickle at the back of my throat this morning. After checking the 2 Point Health Service website, it suggests I might be suffering from a bout of bubonic death clog. If you don't hear from me again, you will know why. This could very well be my farewell song. Enjoy it.
Yes, I'm back from my dinner, and yes, excellent. I'd recommend that.
Rejoice, my friends, for I am alive and well. I had a cough drop during that song, and the tickle has completely cleared. No bubonic death clog for me. I have selected a very special tune to celebrate the occasion.
Today we have a live edition of Sommelier Over the Rainbow, where I'll be reviewing what I'm drinking right now. What is it I'm drinking? What? Okay, we're not sure what it is, but I can assure you that it's very good. In fact, I must go and get some more of it. That's the show. Here's some music.
Education is the foundation on which civilization is built. For example, notice how the 3 nouns I used in the previous sentence all have a similar sound. That is called a rhyme. Now off you go to look up what a noun is.
You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
Good day. You're listening to 2 Point Radio, and I am Sir Nigel Bickleworth. Today's show is going to be, well, I can't think of the word, positively enormous. Gargantuan, really. Ah, yes, jumbo. Standing in Hogsport yesterday evening, I wondered if even the great masters could have captured the dwindling light as it painted its dreamy oranges across the sky. Then I realized the great masters never had to contend with the fumes spewing out of the meltdowns. In the news today, CEO of Jumbo Megacorp, Jumbo McNally, addressed a report from the 2 Point Squabbler that accused Mr. McNally of tax fraud, saying, "I actually pay more taxes than I have to. The reporters should be ashamed of themselves and are liars. I'm sure you're all as relieved as I am to have the situation clarified." I don't mind telling you it's a bit nippy in the booth today. The heater is malfunctioning and the window is stuck in an open position. I have no choice but to engage in vigorous exercise. Now, if you'll excuse me. For this edition of my Guide to Good Manners, we're looking at how to gracefully navigate customer service. Where better to turn than to Jumbo's Customer Guide. If you haven't paid for our extended warranty, you shouldn't have broken your Jumbo product. So, yes. There you have it.
This is Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
Aren't opinions fabulous? Mine certainly are. I'm often taken aback by the overwhelming quality of my own opinions. Why don't you get in touch with some of your opinions? I have discovered the heater had been jammed with sodium snacks. No wonder it ceased to function. I suspect this is the work of that unhygienic anarchist Harrison Wolfe. Words will be had, I assure you. We turn to an opinion from one of you. Mrs. A. Listener says, "The only thing I like as much as your show, Nigel," a lady of taste, I see, "are all of my Jumbo products because they're all just so great. Goodness, really just marvelous. Any negative reviews online must be fake because I don't see how anyone could think otherwise." Well, the people seem to have spoken, don't they? And 2 Point Radio. If you enjoyed that charming tune, perhaps you can repay me by writing to the mayor. I am of the opinion that 2 Point County has far too many people. So join me in imploring our elected official to close the borders at once. If you're still not so inclined, this next song should seal the deal. Now, Sommelier Over the Rainbow, where I'll be tasting Jumbo's synthetic wine, Faux Rouge. Here goes.
Wow, that really is quite something. Not afraid to be what it is. Bold, fearless, really, and it certainly does look a lot like wine. That's all for today. Thank you for joining us here at 2 Point Radio. Today's show was sponsored by Jemba Megacorp. Topless Mountain. Yet another reminder of the unmatched stupidity coursing through the veins of 2 Point County. Just because a mountain loses its traditional peak through geological and meteorological wear and tear does not mean that it has no top. Cretins. Peasants at a remote hospital recently came face to face with the Wigbert Silverbottom. I do not mean to sound critical, but surely there are duties more befitting of his time. An event on the dinner party circuit, or receiving an honorary degree, perhaps. Wiggy, wherever you are, come home. There are reports of dangerous solar activity starting fires and generally scalding things at an offshore hospital. I'm sure we can all agree that the sun must be stopped at all costs. I've just been informed that a water tornado is affecting those at a hospital off the coast of the 2 Point County mainland. Concerning news, but not for those on the mainland, I suppose. I'm being told that a 2 Point County hospital has been infested with frogs. Of course it has. I'll add that, in other news, Mayor Winsock expressed her desires to run an all-gibbon cabinet, and the Pointy Mountains were last seen drifting into the sky, after bidding all of us adieu in a deep, booming voice. Sober up, people.
2 Point Radio.
Welcome to this fate-filled day. You'll join me, Sir Nigel Bickleworth, at the sloop for opening day of the Grand Point Final, where the Flemington Languistine are set to play the Mole Men of Smogley. The question on everyone's mind, who is going to win after all of the various playing? Join me for Whack-Off after this. We're back, and it's been a flying start for the Languistine, the kind of start that would suggest it's more likely than not that you'll win eventually. Of course, it's still totally possible and plausible that they'll lose from this position, as many teams have before them. They'll continue to play, and we'll see what happens. Breakthrough for the Mole Men! There it is. That'll be discouraging for Flemington, but the match is on. It's open and certainly still anyone's to play in. A quick update on the conditions. Our playing surface is holding up nicely, and whilst the cloud cover might come into play later, for now, it hasn't.
You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
The first half of the day is in the books, with the other half yet to be written. There's been a little bit of something for everyone so far, although it's unclear if that will last. Lucky for us, it's mostly up for grabs this afternoon. Join me, the return of play, and my looming lunch after this. Terrible scenes here at the sloop as an assistant has spilled what appears to be cheese sauce in the press box. I think, yes, it's on my leg. The wool blend won't like that. It's not looking good for the career of this once hopeful young upstart. Will she come back from this? In the opinion of this journalist, no. As we near the final chapter of today's play, it's time for Sir Nigel's Player of the Day. Today, that honor goes to Mortimer Pickles. His team would have not had the requisite number of players without him, and didn't he do it with characteristic grace and flair? It's a pleasure to see Pickles at the height of his powers, and today was certainly a day where that can be said to have been true. It's been a fantastic day of organic theatre here at the sloop. Join us for day 2, or is it game 2, tomorrow on 2 Point Radio. If we're lucky, we'll be another day closer to a result in this year's Grand Point Final.
This is Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
Good day. That's no banality. Today really is a good day as we conclude the first installment of Reading with Sir Nigel here on 2 Point Radio. My days running a book club at the Daily Sneer were truly some of the best of my life, and I really do feel resuscitated to be at it again. Do join in the discussion, providing that your input is worthy of my time. Cynthia Bungburn starts us off by saying, I like the way the characters do things and then things change based on what they do. That's clever, that is. Oh dear, someone clearly sat facing the wrong way at school, didn't they, Cynthia? I recommend trying something a little more appropriate and rudimentary. The back of a cereal box, perhaps? I would like to take a moment to discuss the excellent veneer of this tome. Whilst it might not compare to the leather-bound editions of old, there is certain modern class to its binding in print. I really rather like it. He who said, "Don't judge a book by its cover," probably only owned one kind of shoe polish.
2 Point Radio.
Let's take a step back and think about how this particular novel fits into Mr. Yeti's oeuvre. For the publicly educated amongst you, that's a term from the French for egg basket. The eggs in this case being books. One of you noted that it came after the ones before it and before the one after it. That's not bad, actually. Moving on. Orchid Johnson writes in, Hello, so excited for book club, always wanted to do one, but never had the chance. My book didn't come in time, but I look forward to reading it when it arrives. Promise to plan better in the future, lol. I'll have a segment for you once you've done the required reading. We're nearing the end of the show, yet I fear that we've only started to scratch the surface of scratching the surface. A quick reading might accelerate the process. Here goes. First published by Damp Stamp Publishing, Flemington, 2 Point County. Oh, I see what I've done there. We shan't be doing this again, I think, but thank you one and all for allowing me to relive my glory days and see, once and for all, that they are behind me and truly dead forever. Goodbye for now. I overheard a couple planning an upcoming visit to Goldpan the other day. Why should the youth of our county feel compelled to spend their leisure time visiting a glorified petrol station? Economic hardship or sheer stupidity? Call in to cast your vote. I don't make a habit of valorizing anyone who uses the interweb as their primary publishing format, but a tip of the hat to Charlottine Fishwrapper of the 2 Point Squabbler, whose quality work has forced me online into what is, by and large, a deceitful, classless realm. What a shame that mineral clusters of such great scientific intrigue would fall into an area from which no one will bother to fetch them. Improve your aim if you want us to better understand you, O celestial heavens above. I've been told to report that part of a satellite has fallen on residents in the south of the county. They'll be glad for the scrap metal, I'm sure. Vermin are vermin. To report such tautology as I'm currently being asked to do is a waste of time. My time is being wasted. Your time is being wasted. But here we go. Raccoons have been reported going through county bins. This does not qualify as larceny.
2 Point Radio.
Welcome, welcome! Today I will be hearkening back to the golden age of radio by playing a recorded drama written and performed many moons ago by yours truly in the formative days of my career. This was a time when people had an attention span and radio shows were far, far longer, so we have abridged the narrative for your content-craved minds. Inspector Blanbury had received, some 3 weeks prior, an unexpected invitation to dine at the home of a Mr. and Mrs. P.W. Fields. Not one to look a gift dinner in the face, Blanbury had accepted, and now, yes, right this moment, makes his way towards Fields Manor. Inspector Blanbury in Fields of Murder. Blanbury arrived at the Grand Manor House in a storm as turbulent as his nerves. There had been no communication between he and his old friend Percy Fields since a rotten dispute over a dropped catch at Third Slip. Such was the weather that Blanbury didn't spot that the door was open until it was upon him.
Hello? Percy? It's Blanbury. Why, there seems to be no one here.
A thud sounded from upstairs. Blanbury stood at the entrance to the master bedroom, its windows open and flapping wildly in the wind. The contents of a bookcase lay strewn across the floor.
If only I could make some blasted sense of all this. There must be some kind of connection. Why, yes, a connection. That would do.
Blanbury sat alone in the drawing room, 1,000 thoughts swirling in his mind as the gale rose to a fever pitch around the manor's many, many spires.
Think, Blanbury, think. I'm here in this home. I'm here to see my old friend Percy. This is his home. Oh, something's just not right.
The storm illuminated the mantel, revealing a picture frame. Blanbury's curiosity carried him towards it.
Why, that's not Percy.
A chill fell down his spine. The walls, the carpet, and the curtains, the fabrics of his old friend's home were, in fact, nothing of the sort. This wasn't the home of Mr. and Mrs. P.W. Fields. The breath caught in his chest as he reached into his jacket pocket for the invitation.
Oh, I see. Oh, I'm definitely not at that address. How embarrassing.
I hope that you have enjoyed today's entertainment. It does make me rather dewy-eyed to hear it back after all this time, and it comes as a pertinent reminder to us all. Do check the locations and date on your invitations so as to avoid misunderstandings and embarrassment. Cheerio!
You're listening to Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
Tally-ho, breaker, breaker, come in, and so forth. It is I, Sir Nigel Bickleworth. And no, I'm not actually calling in from the past. Today is our yearly check of the station's old broadcasting equipment, in case our newer, supposedly superior equipment should fail us. For a bit of fun, I'll be bringing you a show befitting of this classic dust-kissed apparatus. The show is only just beginning, and already I can tell that this venerable broadcasting system is adding a certain I'm not sure how to my show. How lucky you all are to be hearing me like this. Its sound, like a beloved pair of domestic slip shoes, just feels right. Does it not? I think it does. One of my favourite films is on at the flickering Sprocket Picture Theatre at the moment. The classic Bert Roy and the Anvil will be shown across the weekend. It's well worth your time, and I should note that it was the first 2 Point County production to use a real anvil. Before then, it was standard practice to dress up an actor as the anvil, but you could always tell.
This is Nigel Bickleworth on 2 Point Radio.
Welcome back, and now the stocks. Blue chippers are up at 45, while the greens have fallen to 87 overnight. The TPBs are coming in at 2030, 883.80 and 4. Ornamental pigeons have flown up in daily trading, but are still down from last month. While I'm hearing, yes, they've run out of orange juice. I've just had a sham sandwich for my lunch. Yes, remember sham? The ham substitute was, at a certain point in our county's history, a beloved and affordable high-in-iron alternative. I remember it somewhat fondly, but I must confess it is truly rather dreadful. All the same, it's the perfect foodstuff to accompany today's test. And I did buy a great sum of it 3 years ago, which needs getting through. I have reports that aliens have arrived in 2 Point County. No word as of yet as to their intentions, but I believe it is safe to say that the aliens almost certainly want to change our way of life forever. Oh, one could only imagine the panic induced by such a false alarm of this kind all those years ago. And to think that it happens so often, oh, the mind boggles. I hope that you've enjoyed today's show even more than usual. I know I have, but it really does take an exceptionally long time to set up the equipment. It has pulleys, counterweights, everything seems to be made of lead, and there's some form of joist system. Still, all in all, time well spent, I think.
I am willing to succumb to current trends and do my bit for the future, although I'm not sure what it's done for me. But I draw the line at being told to update my choice of automobile. Yes, it may only provide 2 miles of travel per gallon of petroleum fuel, but it is an antique and deserves your unconditional respect. Since the school system has ceased teaching our apocalyptic origins and the founding of New Point, I shall have to pick up the slack. New Point was, of course, the first major settlement in our county after the previous civilization crumbled into the earth which bore it. Today, old New Point stands as a symbol of a simpler time, a time when people spoke to their neighbours and stank of rotten turnips. Ah, Fitzpocket Academy, the setting for many of 2 Point's finest, most elegant parties. I was lucky enough to attend an opening at the Academy myself once. Unfortunately, I slipped on a piece of wayward salmon, burst through some French windows, and ended up in a fountain. I can't be certain why, but I never was invited back. Well, their loss. One Ms. Zara Fitzpocket is spending some of her time at 2 Point County hospitals. Perhaps she'll manage to class the place up a bit. Although I do warn patients and staff, when the great young Fitzpockets spent time at this very radio station, the art that resulted was less than complimentary of yours truly. Fortunately, it was also poorly received. Oh, come on, people. Some chap flogging a broken clock is not proof of time travel. The man's a fraudster, a cheat, a quack, a phony Frederick and a swindling Willie, a hustler and a downright loony. If he'd like to make his case, then why doesn't he simply travel to this moment in time and join us on the air? Well, that's what I thought. Do you believe you can be born in the wrong time? I've always felt that I belonged in the Middle Ages. I'd have been a baron, or a king, or something delightfully dogmatic like that, ruling piously over my people with jagged wit and an iron fist. Oh, how I pine for those glorious darkened days where men lived to the ripe age of 12. When I was a young lad, we didn't have silly luxuries like paramedics or ambulances. Whenever I broke a leg, I would simply hop 7 miles uphill in the snow to get a lollipop from the school nurse. 2 if it was both legs.